Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you're watching the one-to-one. This is Martin Redman again on our Digital Dialogues, live from London. I'm joined today by Joseph Adir, live from Palma, I believe, sitting in his lovely home in the middle of nowhere. And we're going to talk some really interesting stuff about driving the industry forward. Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing well, enjoying the isolation on the island.
Isolation in what way?
We used to be here pretty isolated. Now there are plenty of tourists coming over. I think things are changing very rapidly. We'll see how things will evolve here. Hopefully it won't be like Barcelona.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, you've got a very interesting career. Tech entrepreneur primarily, but you've been in the market now for 5 years. Give me a brief background of your 5-year journey, Joseph.
I started the journey out of sheer desire to help a friend that was in the industry, was looking to finance a shipyard. And he came over to me and said, "Look, can you give me a hand?" I said, "Look, I'm extremely well connected to all the private equity investment bankers in London. I have very solid network. Let's go and do it. It shouldn't be a problem. It should be a walk in the park." Down the road, we realized that this was not a walk in the park, and it was more of a walking nightmare. And I really started to learn the industry inside out, because in order to try and help such a gap, you need to understand where the industry is coming from. And I think that the first area that I really came across is the fact that there was no bankable data in the industry. And if you remember, Martin, already a few years ago, we talked about it. This was my biggest frustration, that there is no audited data, where banks, investment funds, insurance companies, pension funds can rely on the information as solid data, not kind of, I would say, he said, she said. And at that time, if you go 5 years ago, there was no single listed company in our industry on any financial markets. Today, you have 2-3 of them. Obviously, you have the GYG group, you have San Lorenzo, you have others now in the US, out of the involvement of the whole M&A activity. But there was no one. And I think that talking to all the various players in the industry, I realized that the way that information is collected is by various sources in the industry telling their story. It ain't good enough, because you can tell whatever you want, and tomorrow morning, if it's not verifiable by at least 2 solid sources, it's not bankable. And we're actually one of the very last industries. You cannot get any data on the industry on Bloomberg. We do not exist there. And this was actually where I started, because when you look for data, when you try to raise funding into an industry, you need to really to dig very deep into the industry. And that was driving me into just realizing that there is also a gap in the service. I made, when I was very young, I was helping IBM to fulfill a gap in the service market, where at that time they started to launch the IBM XT computer, which only people with a lot of gray hair still remember. And they didn't have any way to repair it. They launched the hardware without any mechanism to support and repair it. And I came with a very innovative solution with in-circuit tester. We were able to test those motherboards very quickly and to repair them in a very quick turnaround time. And I always felt that servicing is the best way to understand an industry inside out. because at the end of the day, you live the product. You have to understand the product thoroughly, and you are really able to learn from all the aftermarket and all the various activities truly what needs to be changed, what the industry truly needs.
Yeah.
Because out of a problem, you find a solution. You're not trying to invent a solution out of just kind of imagining something. And this was the journey of Winter Heaven.
Yeah.
Winter Heaven was really, it is still a long journey. And maybe we'll talk about it later, but this is really what got me into the industry, to be committed to it 364 days a year.
I think it's an interesting topic. The whole point of investability or bankable data. You and I talk about this lots of times. I've talked about with lots of various accountancy firms, consultancy firms, and other external private equity groups who've tried to get in the market or been tempted by the market. And I think what's interesting is that really does stifle growth in some cases, because when you have an investable industry, the capital inflow suddenly makes the market more dynamic, and you can grow and capitalize on opportunity. We seem to be almost happy where we are as a marketplace in some cases. Is that fair?
Allow me to disagree. I think that when you see a private equity coming into our industry, it's mostly driven by underlying assets and security which are non-related, i.e. that if you're buying into a marine asset and actually you're buying into a property that down the road, without putting names in the interview, but down the road, you can change the use of the land and create a development that actually will generate a return in orders of magnitude bigger than any return you can make from your maritime asset. It's not a maritime investment, it's a property investment.
Okay.
Whereby this was your decision. You analyzed the property and you made a property investment.
Yeah.
And we have a few examples in our industry that this is the naked truth. If the industry had a true bankable data, and you were able to go and to rate debentures, because what the industry needs and what you need is to be able to raise working capital. This is what the industry needs. So you have few shipyards that has been around for many years. They have the balance sheet, they have the ability to go and to raise debt from their banking sources. But these are the very far and few between.
Yeah.
The rest of the shipyards, either they have to go and be acquired by external large outside corporations that inject the capital into them, and you know the industry, you know who is there, or they just choke to death. Because and this is, I think, why you see so many close downs in our industry, and then so many shipyards going out of business or needs to be acquired by other companies that are better funded. Now, it's true, it's in every industry, it is like that. But I think that the working capital requirements of superyachting are much greater than a typical industry. Due to the length of the project, the complexity of the project, sometimes you have a big negative cash flow between the owner payments and the actual cost and expense of the project. And if you want to be able to start to build in a more professional way, and we will get hopefully to Industry 4.0, but if you want to behave like an industrial enterprise, you must have the muscles and the working capital to support it. Yeah. If you don't have the working capital, you'll never be able to work as an industry. You will just work hand to mouth, even when an owner or a project is giving you some money. And you will never think long term, you will think short term, just to try and get the project done, out of the door, and hopefully you'll have a satisfied customer. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe he'll come back, maybe not. And this is not pushing forward a professional industry like any other industry in the world.
Yeah, yeah. So Joseph, that's one of your key frustrations is bankable data. What other things have you discovered in your 5-year journey that you think are ripe for change as opportunity, or things that we need to address as a marketplace?
I came across. I think that in the whole in the whole sphere of large super yachts, I would say any super yachts above 40, 50 meters, this whole space, the way that they are being handled at the moment between let's call it a leisure marina or a reefy shipyard doesn't make sense. These yachts, they need a home, and they need a place where they can get all the support, all the services for the yacht, for the crew, for anyone and everyone involved with the platform to be able to make the yacht ready for the next season properly. Today, what you do is you take yourself a slot in a reefy shipyard. You have a 60 days, 90 days slot. You hope that you finish everything that you need to do. You have very limited time. You jump in, you jump out. There is a high cost involved with the reefy shipyard, and you hope that you've done everything that needs to be done. And this is where we came with the concept of winter heaven, a concept where you're creating actually an environment where the yacht can reside permanently, but in a technical environment, in a professional environment, not in a touristic marina, in the profile of Saint-Tropez or Port Vale or anywhere else. So the concept of winter heaven was to be able to provide a base where hundreds of technical services will be provided by the leading subcontractors in the industry, but at the same time, you have no time restriction. So you have all the services are fully managed, all the site is fully managed, so it's not an anarchy. It's a very well professionally managed. And by the way, the management of the site, this is what drove me 2 years ago. We worked with a company that developed an AI platform to manage ports. It was an AI platform that was originally a military platform that was taking into management of big utilities and ports. And we started to work with this company to develop a control and management system for winter heaven. And we did a huge amount of work, so we will be able to do all the task scheduling, all the central billing, all the work around the super yachts, all controlled by an AI platform. So all the tasks will be properly scheduled. Everyone will know exactly what's going on site all of the time, from the captain through the chief engineer to the management company, everything in full transparency. And again, transparency, we talked about data. Transparency is also very important around all the supporting services.
Yeah.
There is no reason to hide anything. So that's how we came into the whole AI space 2 years ago, that we realized that it will be great. We'll have the best system in the world in winter heaven. But when the yacht is coming, actually, when I will ask the captain what needs to be done, I will get either a pile of notes, or I'll get some Excel sheet that there is some data on it, or if it's a little bit more organized, there will be a proper printout, but you will not have any insight, information, what is truly needed to be done on the yacht, because there is no, let's say in a car, when you go to the garage, they connect the computer into the plug of the ECU,
Yeah.
and they know exactly the condition of your car, end to end, no buts or ifs. You come with the yacht to Winter Haven, there is nothing to connect to. The only connection that you have is you talk to the chief engineer, to the captain, to the management company, to all the various stakeholders, and you hope that you get the full data.
Yeah.
So this was really the driving force, and this is what showed me there is a gap in the market that needs to be fulfilled, that it's impossible that at the moment, any craft on the planet, whether it's a car, whether it's a train, whether it's a plane, you can get 100% of the data live, and you can mine the data, you can run machine algorithms on the data, you can do predictive on the data. In the superyachting industry, doesn't exist. So this was really the driving behind WinTech, that it started from Winter Haven Technology, and in Winter Haven Technology, we started the development of the platform for Winter Haven, and that's how one was leading to the other.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic in terms of, there's two things you're mentioning here, which I think are very key. One is you're referring to the idea of having a very transparent, pure service center without all the, let's say, you mentioned anarchy. I think that's a very strong word, but it's like the idea of lots of different people coming and going into a marina environment for different projects without what I call streamlined coordination. And I think that's something that is fairly key across a market where you want to have predictive planning and organization and preemptive planning with these projects. Then on top of that, you're talking about AI. And AI is being talked about in lots of industries and very advanced in other industries. And it's been talked about in our industry recently. And even one of the one-to-ones recently was a comment that AI can do a lot more on board by Stefano Tossiti, who's our most recent one-to-one, was saying AI can actually predict what the owner wants in terms of food or provisions or lifestyle or all the other elements related to his customer experience. And we need to embrace this, because this is the part of we are in the most expensive entertainment space. Therefore, we should be giving what I call the whole next generation of that predictive, perfect service. That's what you're getting to, isn't
it? Again, we are, I agree with you with the big picture, but what we are trying to solve at the moment is one big but relatively small building block on the way for a total end-to-end AI-driven autonomous superyacht.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to look forward, this is where we will be 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or we don't, we will get there. The new owners of superyachts coming from the West Coast of the United States, they will drive it.
Yeah.
And there were enough past entrepreneurs that pushed the envelope almost to that degree many years ago, from Jim Clark through Steve Jobs and many others. And Paul Allen, I think that there will be enough future buyers that will understand that it's impossible to run such a complex integration of systems called a superyacht without a proper machine learning.
Yeah, yeah.
And you need, before you have an AI, you need to start with the fundamentals. You need to start to teach the machine. And people getting confused in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to understand, and we're going back here to data. We're closing a full circle, because in order for me to teach my ML, my machine learning algorithms, the behavior, I need data. I need operational data of the superyacht. I need historical data. We're in an industry that even when you go to the biggest shipyards, the amount of operational data that they have on the ships, those superyachts are big ships,
yeah,
they produce is negligible. They don't have devices that actually record all the operational data 24/7 on the yacht. It's not part of the architecture. You don't have a black box.
So what do they have at the moment from your experience so far?
What they have a lot of monitoring systems.
Okay.
There is a huge difference between a monitoring system and a predictive system. A predictive system is a system that needs to accumulate a lot of operational data and correlate events to reach a conclusion when an expiry of a component or a system will happen. Expiry, i.e. fault. So if I want to tell you that your pump will have a failure within 4 weeks, I need a lot of data.
Yeah.
And the way that you do it is the fact that you have a PLC or a controller connected to the pump, the data that you get there, the moment that this controller will tell you that you have a fault, it's too late.
Mm.
You want to know that you will have to replace this pump in 4 weeks. So the captain can notify the management company that they should make sure that there is a pump waiting in the next port where they're going to visit, and they pick up the pump ahead of time.
Yeah.
And they replace the pump ahead of time, and they don't have a downtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the pump is always being used because it's the most simple example to describe a fault, because everybody understands when a pump is working and when a pump is not working. Let alone much more complex systems. Now, the moment that you move to very complex, and I'll give you kind of the other end of the spectrum, take a stabilizer. A stabilizer is a device that is working very hard in order to keep the yacht comfortable for the owner and the guests. At the end of the day, it's part of the service.
Yes.
But looking at the stabilizer alone is not the right way. You have to look at the stabilizer. It's a system that it has a purpose, but at the same time, you have to look at the specific course over water that the ship was taking under specific weather, and to understand whether the wave frequency and height and the wind actually were the cause for the stabilizer to work the way it worked. Now, if you don't have this data to correlate with the functionality of the stabilizer, you might think that you have a fault. You might not get the right level of service to your customers. If you integrate the knowledge of the absolute knowledge of the environment, which, by the way, these systems exist and they are deployed on cruise ships and big container ships, because you cannot have them running into the waves in a way that will either jeopardize the cargo or the passengers on board will get sick. So these systems exist. What you need to do is you need to do a wide cross integration between these systems and the machine learning on the stabilizer, and create an input to the captain how to first of all, that he will know what is the optimal course that he should take to make sure that the guests are having the best time, and at the same time, whether deviations from operational envelope is driven by a fault or it's driven by the sheer conditions that the Superyacht is facing at the moment.
Yes.
And this is just, again, we can go through very many systems. Each and every system, you need data. Now, at the moment, there is no data. We looked around. You can get data. For example, all the electrical panels made by the biggest brands in Europe, some of them are already embedded with ML into the panels, and they have big databases. The big data is available on the electrical panels. Or, for example, electric motors for elevators in the Superyachts. You can get data on them. But when you get down to the more typical systems, whether it's the air conditioning systems, whether it's the water systems, the black water, the gray water, all the different propulsion systems, there is no machine learning databases for them. Nobody started to develop the algorithms to look into these machines. And there is now a massive task, and what we're doing in WinTech, we're trying now to implement a cutting edge technology that was patented by a company that allows you to run this machine learning very quickly to a very high level of accuracy with less data, but at the same time to have two spheres of data. One is what we call a thin skin machine learning on board, which is Edge ML, on board the Superyacht, and then to have a big ML depository with the big data in the cloud on the center, on the WinTech center. And hopefully, and this is what we're working at the moment to start to get our alpha site and beta sites, we will be able to transfer knowledge, behavior knowledge, from one project to another. Because in the beginning, we'll have two Superyachts connected to the machine learning. So we will learn a little.
Yeah.
Hopefully, very quickly, we'll get 10 Superyachts. All the data is being accumulated, and the machine never stops learning.
Yeah.
Now, from all the learning that you collect, you can develop, then the artificial intelligence is the next layer above. The artificial intelligence is looking at the big data, looking at the learning that has been accumulated, and can reach very complex decisions, such as what you described.
Yeah.
For example, in certain sea conditions, what will be the best food and drinks to be served? You can go to crazy extremes.
But I think that's the point, is that we are in an extreme industry where I'm not saying money is no object, but money is spent on things that sometimes do not perform as they are intended to. What you're describing now is what I call a Superyacht 4.0 next generation evolution that will make our yachts intelligent. And all these things will drive, let's say, a positive change in the way we operate yachts. You mentioned about Winter Haven as a refit center. The whole frustration I hear from a refit space is the lack of information coming off the yacht to plan an efficient refit. So all this suddenly starts to make sense to drive our industry forward. So my last question before we finish on this topic is, what are the barriers that you're facing, and how is the industry, let's say, adopting or even talking about AI at the moment? Because I think it's there in the real world, and it's a really powerful part of the real world development. What's your
I think that the biggest challenge is that the superyachting building industry, i.e. the shipyards, must become digital. They must transform from industry 3.0 to industry 4.0.
Yeah.
They are the source. Now, the moment that they will start to design superyachts as digital twins, as all other industries are doing at the moment, any and every industry around us is doing it that way, that actually you perfect the design and simulation of your product as a digital twin.
Yeah.
And only once you perfected the digital twin, you move on to start to cut 1 meter of steel. The moment that you have the digital twin gives you the ability to train the crew, to design the whole AI ML into the system, to use the digital twin envelope to drive the AI ML. It helps you managing the project properly. You stop having all these change orders throughout the project and all the delays in the project and everything, because all was simulated and looked at on any and every aspect ahead of time.
Yeah.
Your project is shorter, delivery is more perfected, you have dramatically less defects to deal with. You don't need 6 months of sea trials and debug period, which is almost unbelievable. You will need maybe 2 months of it, maybe 1 month. God knows where we can push the envelope. And then what happened is that during the life cycle of the super yacht, this digital twin is actually preserving and maintaining the longevity of the asset, because it looks all the time at the yacht together with the AI ML, and together you can identify the issues, identify the problems, and then go back to the shipyard and give them the knowledge how to build the next one, even to a higher level of perfection.
Yeah, yeah.
And suddenly you have accumulated knowledge, and everything is predictable, everything is known, there are no unknowns anymore. And I think that, my dream is that I will still have the opportunity to see the super yachting industry moving into Industry 4.0, moving into full digital design and simulation of super yachts, and moving into AI ML fully. Let's hope so.
Yeah, Joseph, I think it's a very, very interesting topic and part of our brave new world. And I feel that the next generation of client will find this very exciting. So listen, I think this is definitely a conversation we'll have in Amsterdam, and definitely a conversation we'll perpetuate in the next few months. So Joseph, thanks a million for your time, and thanks for your candor.
Thank you very much, Martin.
See you again soon.
All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.